There's a feeling in the air that you can't get anywhere except in Calgary. I taste 1,000 yesterdays and I love the magic waves of Calgary. From the mountains close at hand, I can look across the land and see you touch the sky. From the prairies glow to where the sunsets go, we're all good neighbors passing by. Makes no difference where I go, you're the best hometown I know. Hello Calgary, hello Calgary, channels 2 and 7 love you.
Brief history of what we call the Poffenroth dairy farm at DeWinton. The barn was built by my grandfather, Henry Poffenroth, in about 1911, and he moved his cattle from his dairy farm in Calgary, which was situated just below North Nose Hill, which probably would be more closer to being North Mount Drive. How they moved the cattle out, I'm not sure, but I assume they probably moved it out by the CPR rail, which comes right out to this area. The barn, of course, at that time was not powered by electricity, and I assume that the early milking was done by hand. My grandfather was a prominent dairy Holstein breeder and carried on his dairy farming here until probably just after the Second World War, when my father, Walter Poffenroth, assumed control and operation of the farm. The barn is approximately 100 feet long. It's made of mostly fir, and the structure of the barn is constructed in such a way that the hayloft on top was where all the hay obviously was stored for the cattle, and in the earlier years it was put up loose, later put in by bale. The loose hay was quite unique in that there is a large trap door on the peak of the barn, and that comes down, and they had a normal hay rack which had slings on it, and there's also a loader that went behind the rack and picked up the swaths of hay and loaded it onto the hay rack. The hay rack was then brought back to the front of the barn, and the slings were connected by ropes up to a track that ran the length of the barn. The track would pick up, or the sling, I'm sorry, would pick up approximately 1/3 of a load of hay, and then it would be carried back to whatever location in the loft where they wished to dump it, and it would be tripped, and that's how the hay was stored for the winter months. Now the slings were pulled up by a rope. In other words, the team of horses that would be pulling the hay rack would also be used to pull the sling back into the barn by a series of ropes, a large rope that hooked onto a pulley at the back of the barn. As far as the actual operation of the dairy was concerned, at one point, when my father was operating the farm, they milked up to 48 head of, or 48 cows. In the earlier days, the milk was taken, or cream, depending upon whether they separated or not, was taken over to the taken by horse-drawn vehicles over to the DeWinton station, and then taken by train into Calgary. Later, the the bulk milk was handled in 8-gallon cans and picked up by a transport. We transferred it into Calgary, and I believe the company that they delivered the milk to was called Union Milk. The barn originally was designed to also house the workhorses or draft horses that were used on the farm, and on the south side of the barn towards the rear there is a separate entrance which was for the horses, and usually they maintained 2 teams or 4 horses which were kept in the back of the barn and used for obviously farming purposes such as hay in the summertime, hauling milk, or just general chores. And obviously prior to the tractor, the horses were also used for farming. The later additions to the farm or to the barn would have been a automatic barn cleaner, which involved a elevated ramp at the rear of the barn, and the gutters would be cleaned automatically, but there never was power to start with, so that barn cleaner was not installed until probably sometime in the 1960s. The other thing that would probably be interesting is that originally I mentioned that the cows were milked by hand, but my grandfather very early on in the I'm not sure of the exact dates, but would have had a gas-powered engine which ran a vacuum pump, and then they operated the milking machines by gas power. Also, in the early stages, he installed a gas lighting system in the barn, and the barn had gas lighting prior to the house, and obviously prior to the power.
Okay.
Okay. Originally, the dairy cows all were in these stanchions here, which they put their head through here, and then this board would just go forward, and that would lock them in there. And this was set up on both sides of the barn. As you'll note now, some of the one side of the barn has been pretty well all converted into box stalls, which were basically where a cow and calf would be kept until they could go out to pasture. The pipes here have a little spigot, which was the vacuum pumping. The hoses used to go onto the vacuum and attach to the milking units. And oddly enough, the very interesting thing was all of these cattle, even though you were talking up to 40 cattle, they all knew their place, and they were let out for water twice a day and exercise. When they came back in, they all knew their place, and it was quite interesting. In front of them is the remnants of a manger, and they were fed there. They were fed twice a day, just at milking time, and they were fed hay, and plus also they would get a mixture of grain, which was usually chopped up oats with some supplements added to it. The there was an alleyway in front here where you could move along and move in the hay into the mangers. And note now, this is the gutters here with the remnants of the barn cleaner in it, and that would just circulate all around and go out to the rear where the manure would then be loaded onto a manure wagon and then spread on the fields. The cattle all had straw bedding, and of course that was changed and moved into the gutters as time went on. The little compartment there, which is pretty well dilapidated now, but that was a grain storage room where you got the grain through the door there to feed it to the cattle. The milking room was in here, and the old gas-powered pump. This is an old gas-powered McCormick Deering engine, which ran a little vacuum setup at the back, and that was the vacuum that was piped out and then used for the milking. And those are some of the teacups that would fit onto a stainless steel can, which had a small regulator head on it, and then with a hose that went to the vacuum lines. The little tin on top was a cleansing unit where you used to fill up the teacups at night to sanitize them. That's an old heater for water. If you needed to heat up a pail of water to wash up all of the milking equipment in the evening, that you'd heat up the water, and the milking units would be held here. You'd wash them up here and then put them back on, and they'd be stacked on this shed here. It's unfortunate it's in such a mess right now. It doesn't really give you a full, but it was quite the state of the art at its time. The loft is up here, and if you notice, there's ladders go up there, and that was just a crawl space up. There's one on each side. Well, that one's gone now, but that's where you used to go up to the loft, and then you'd throw down, in the early days, throw down loose hay and pile it up there, and then it would be brought into to feed the cows. Later, of course, it was bales, and you just toss down bales. And I can take you back here now. This is, again, maybe hard to. This actually was kept as a separate pen for the young calves in the wintertime, and they would all be kept in here, and they would be fed raw milk from the cows. This has been changed, but this was the ramp. We can see that from outside. That's a separate doorway there. It's level now, but it used to be on a ramp, so that the draft horses would come up, and they had separate stanchions in here so that you could have roughly 4 horses from here to the end. And this originally was a tack room for the horses, where they kept their harness and the like. It's pretty much it. And this little item here was what would appear to be an old coffee can, which had the notation SIGs on it, and was filled with sand, so that anybody that was smoking, and everybody smoked in those days, so that that's where the butts went. I don't know if we can see it anymore, but also they named some of the cows, and they took old coffee cans and cut them with tin snips, and then they wrote the names of the cows, like Lucy or Patsy or Sarah or whatever. And it didn't continue, but in later years, my father also, they did a lot of testing of the, like they did butterfat content of their milk, so they did that with the province. Provincially, once a month they would test all of the cows, take small samples of milk, and it would go in and it would be tested for butterfat content. And I believe one year my father and his brother won the provincial award for the highest butterfat content for a commercial Holstein herd in Alberta. There were other aspects of the dairy that just come to mind now, that of course at the front of the barn was quite a bit different. There was a separate pump house, and it also had a large water tank in it, which was at ground level, and that's where they used to take the, because you milked twice a day obviously, and the milk from and the milk would not be picked up until the following morning. So the milk was taken out in these 8-gallon cans and submerged in the water tank. The water from the pump would run through this tank and into the cattle tank where the cattle. So that would keep the milk all cool till the next morning, until the transport would pick it up and obviously keep it. And they did what they had to do. And there also is a tank outside, which I can show you in the pump house, which is it's heated underneath. It's like a big cast iron tank, and they used to sometimes do a hot mash for the cattle for supplement. It sometimes involved grains, that they used to get grains from the Calgary brewery. They were the old, more or less the leftover hulls from the malting of beer, and they would mix that with molasses and provide a supplement for the cattle. So it was quite an operation. Or did I?
I think so.
This is a sample of a burlap sack that contained brewery grains. At least that's what we referred to them as. They were the barley husks that were used as dry feed for the dairy cattle, and they would pick them up at the Calgary brewery, a truckload of them, bring them home, and then they'd mix these brewery grains with chopped oats, and sometime would add molasses hulls and other supplements with it to feed to the cattle. And that was always an interesting trip for myself as a small boy going into Calgary, because you always got an ice cream cone. This is an old Maytag wringer washer, and it has in the inside a whatever they call that thing, and of course this is the wringer on top. I'm not sure what it all does, but it originally was powered by a small gas engine, which you kick-started like an old motorcycle, and then it was subsequently when the power was put in out here, they put electric motor on it, and that was how they did the washing.
Okay. Okay.
As I mentioned earlier, the milk, at least in my father's time, was shipped into the Union Milk Company in Calgary, and the Union Milk Company would then process the bulk milk by pasteurizing or processing into cream, butter, ice cream, whatever they did. But my father would have a quota with Union Milk, and there was a contract to provide so much milk, and they get a certain price for per 100 pound of quota milk, and much less if they shipped more than that, because then they'd determine it to be a surplus milk and give you much less for it. Okay, I mentioned earlier that my grandfather had put in a gas lighting system, and I'm not sure what the gas was, but I do recall there was a large, in fact that's part of it over there, I think, the tank, and they actually filled that with some type of a salt, whatever, that generated a gas, and then the gas would be piped through. And this is part of the, in fact it says Luna on it, which must mean something. And this is a sample of one of the lights, which you notice has a little valve on the back to turn it off and on. And then on the top here, where there is for the gas to come out, they had, and I've never seen it, but I understand it had like a mantle, like the old gas lamps would fit on that. So that for the lighting in the barn, they would have had, but that was taken out quite some time ago, but I never saw it operate, but it must have been interesting.
Start, I'll just go around.
Okay, am I started?
Yeah.
What we're looking at now is the barn cleaner, and which you'll see there is a chain and slats on it, and as the manure and the bedding would be scraped off into the gutters, this would circulate around all the way to the end of the barn, where it would then go off, as I mentioned, onto a manure wagon. So it was a labor-saving device that was much appreciated. This barn cleaner never went in until sometime in the 60s, when, or maybe even late 50s, I'm not sure, when there was power. Prior to that, it was a manual system whereby you had an ordinary wheelbarrow and a shovel, and you went along and filled up the wheelbarrow, wheeled it to the end, and physically dumped it onto the wagon. So this was greatly appreciated when it arrived. This tank here, which is hard to pick out, is the tank, the cast steel tank I referred to before, where they used to light a fire under here with wood or coal, and to get the whole mash heated that they'd use to make up the special supplement to feed the cattle. As a matter of interest, this is an old hand pump that used to go on a water wagon, and they would use the water wagon when they were thrashing, and the water wagon would go out in the field so they could water the horses when they were thrashing, and because that would be a necessary requirement. Okay. This is the side of the barn, and the other side is similar, but you'll note that there's two doors up on the loft portion, and that was also used to load or unload hay and other feed that was kept in the loft. The door, which you'd see was on the tracks down there, that was the door that I referred to earlier, where the horses would go in on a ramp. So that's where the draft horses would enter the barn. You can see up on the corner there is a pulley. There's a wooden pulley there. And I had mentioned that when the hay was brought in through the front on the trap door, carried along on a rack, or on a track, sorry, and then dumped periodically wherever they wanted to store it. There was a large rope. It was probably, I don't know, it was probably 1.5 inches wide, that in diameter, that would be hooked on to the slings as it went along. It would be pulled out by the team of horses, and it would pull it off. The team would pull up as far as it was necessary to bring the hay back along the track and then dump it. I do have a book on that. I don't have it here, but I do have a book on the on that hay equipment, which is quite interesting.
Hello, Calgary.